Hi.
Hey, what's up?
All right. You want to get started?
Yeah. Hello and welcome back to the We Should Talk More podcast. The podcast where two lifelong friends who don't have much in common try to get a little bit closer. My name is John, and I have a spidey tingle. That's it.
Hi. My name is Josh Coronel. And for this episode theme, I dressed up as Bruce Lee. Bruce Wayne.
Okay. Already wrong.
Which one? Bruce Lee.
No, you're fine.
Bruce Wayne we're talking about MCU today.
And Bruce Wayne is a DC superhero owned by Warner Brothers, which is not Marvel or Disney.
Yeah, but we're talking. Yeah, sure.
We're starting on a good thing. So we're gonna be talking about the MCU today.
The Marvel
Cinematic Universe.
Oh, cinematic.
Yeah, but before we do, quick toast for our podcast.
For the coffee that I sourced today for us.
Where is this source from?
Let me get it for you. I actually put it right over here.
Okay, I'm waiting.
And you can just cut out that second or two that it took me to get this. We got Stay Golden coffee today.
Yep.
Roasted in Nashville. Stay Golden out there. This shit's good. But
they're a lovely partner of our podcast.
As always, we're drinking coffee, but this time it's a little watered down.
Yeah.
Took us a moment to get ready.
Yeah.
But we're here. We're ready to go. And I'm suited up like Bruce Wayne.
And I'm just wearing my casual podcast clothes.
Wonderful.
But yeah, today we're going to be talking about the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Something that I know a lot about and you know nothing about.
Yeah. Just so I can get my voice in a little bit, because this is one that I won't speak too much in. This is a big one for John. Something he's knowledgeable about. And as you can tell, I'm the expert in the room when it comes to MCU. So I'm looking forward to this one. I'm looking forward to point out the disconnects that you don't understand about the MCU and teach you a thing or two.
Teach me a thing or two.
Teach you a thing or two.
Yeah.
So
I'm open for it.
Yeah. So like you guys know, this is a podcast where we try to talk to understand each other a little bit more. And this is definitely a disconnect. John is really ignorant about film. He's really ignorant about...
Ignorant?
Yeah, ignorant.
Oh, I thought you chose... Okay, yeah.
Yeah, no, he's very ignorant about film. He's very ignorant about superheroes. Very ignorant about the MCU.
Are you using the wrong word?
Ignorant.
All right. Okay. So as the ignorant person, I thought I'd just take the lead on it and talk about it. Yeah. But you make a good point, because it is an interesting one, because this is something with no relation at all. Not a single overlap of interest. Maybe you'll be interested in some of the industry, like business aspects, which we'll talk about. But before we get into that, I did think it would be funny, just because I know you haven't seen any of the movies. I took some photos of some of major characters in this franchise, and I'm just going to show them to you, and I'll pop them up on the screen for those of you who are watching on YouTube or on Instagram or on Facebook or on Twitter. And I just want you to tell me who you think this person is. I want you to give me their full name,
okay,
or just their name, like what you think their name is, and what you think they do, like their power.
Oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun.
Some of these are easy. Some of these, I purposely know that you won't know.
Oh, okay. True context, though. True context. I may have watched less than a handful of Marvel movies.
Yeah.
I have watched maybe one or two with you. We just watched Black Widow this past weekend, so it was good timing. But before this, maybe Doctor Strange.
Yeah, for my birthday.
I have watched Doctor Strange. Before MCU became MCU, I watched the Spider-Man movies. I've watched one or two of the MCU Spider-Man movies. I can't name them. There's Homecoming and maybe something else.
Okay.
So I can say that. And I may have watched one or two other MCU films. Oh, Ant-Man. I watched Ant-Man. So I can say that. How much I can recall, not too well.
But I guess that's good context because I think you've watched as much as any like average person who like doesn't like follow it. Like there's something you just catch them on TV. Like it's just like it's everywhere now where you either had gone to see one or like you saw it like at another point. So yeah, you're not like totally lost. Ignorant. You're not as ignorant as me.
I will also to add like one or two Avenger movies.
Okay.
Too. I know like Loki or Loki.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. All right. So I'm gonna show you. I guess I'll just go in the order that I have them saved, so I know how to go back to it. So
I'm ready.
Who do you think this is?
The Hulk, the Incredible Hulk.
Okay. And what does he do?
He smash.
He smash. He does smash.
He smash.
Do you know who his alter ego is?
Like his real self?
Yeah.
I forget his
name. You were
name.
close to it earlier.
Bruce Wayne. But that's Batman.
It's the first name.
Bruce Springfield.
Bruce Banner.
Bruce Banner.
Yeah. Okay. This was one of the easy ones. Okay. Who do you think this is? This might be an easy
Doctor
one.
Strange.
Okay. And you know what he does.
He does magic. Okay. Black voodoo magic.
Does he black voodoo magic? Who do you think this is?
Iron Man. Cyborg? There is a character named Cyborg, isn't there?
But
that's DC.
That's DC.
That's DC. Yeah.
But that's a close guess because he kind of does look like Cyborg. But no, this is War Machine.
War Machine. Oh,
who's Iron Man's sidekick. So you're close.
Yeah. See, just to disconnect pieces that I was putting together for you.
Okay, this one you might not know at all. Who's this?
Wait, let me get a little bit closer.
If you don't know, just make it up.
Yeah, no, I think he the Flash.
What does he do?
He runs.
That's
Green Arrow.
No.
Am I getting closer?
You're getting farther.
I got you. Oh, not Luke Cage, but the other series with the Asian guy.
No. All right. This is the Winter Soldier. Man, I don't even know how to explain it. He's a super soldier. So he's like a person who's like slightly.
I'm supposed to tell you what he does.
Oh yeah. I kind of just you guessed the Flash and
yeah, but then,
you were already wrong.
But I mean, with the Flash, I know what the Flash does.
Okay.
But he is a sharpshooter.
No, he's just like a strong guy with a metal arm.
Yeah. Oh, that is just a metal arm. Mm-hmm. That wasn't just like his his suit. No.
Okay. You probably know this one.
Yeah. Wakanda. It's not his name, but Wakanda's where he's from. Mm-hmm. Why am I failing to remember the name of the movie?
It's a political organization.
It's a political organization?
Yeah, there's a political organization.
Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Black Panther.
I forgot the name of
it. What does Black Panther do?
Black Panther is a strong guy.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. He's strong guy.
He fights well. Mm-hmm. I remember his fights. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of politics involved in it too. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it was a beautiful film.
Okay. All right, we're rounding the last two. Who's this? These last two might be hard. Yeah, she bad.
She's a baddie. We got a baddie here.
So this what would this baddie do?
She's a tempest.
A what?
Temptress?
Temptress?
What's the word for it? Tempest? one of the three.
She's her name is
Temptress.
The Scarlet Witch.
The Scarlet Witch.
And she's magic. She's like Doctor Strange. She's a magic.
Oh, really?
Girl. Yeah.
Interesting.
Magic girl. Okay, last one.
Oh, Black Ivy.
No. All right, let's say it's Black Ivy. What does Black Ivy do?
She's poisonous.
No. This is her name is Gamora. And
Close enough.
she's just an alien. She doesn't really do anything.
Oh,
She's kind of sexy.
yeah. I mean, she's a baddie too.
Yeah.
There's an A behind her.
Oh, that's like the Avengers logo.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah, that's my
Who's this?
favorite. That's my favorite.
all right. That was funny. I was curious how you would do. You did better than I thought. You did better than I thought.
I really fucked up with the Black Panther though.
Yeah. Which is not gonna look good on you.
It won't. It won't look good. I don't know why. I could only remember Wakanda for a moment.
Yeah. I mean that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I've been interested in. I'm a superhero like fanboy. I've watched all the movies.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched all the TV shows. But there is an interesting history. The MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's like a franchise that exists on its own. Like there has been nothing as successful, and arguably there may not be anything as successful. But also there's more to that, which we'll get to later. But
Yeah.
I guess to get into it, like for context, superhero, you know about comic books, don't you?
I have come across comic books before.
So superhero movies have existed before the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the 70s, there were very popular Superman films. Maybe you've seen some of them. The really old ones with Christopher Reeves.
Yeah, I know what you're speaking about.
So those films, when they came out, were it set a precedent because there weren't like superhero movies like that were as widely popular. So when movies like Superman came out is when you started seeing like Batman getting all these like movies, and maybe you've seen those like the old like 80s and 90s like Batman movies.
Yeah, I think we watched those together.
You probably have. Yeah, I think there was one that we watched for my birthday. And those are all DC. So like
I know that.
So that's just showing like DC is really the one that got the start, like making like popular superhero movies.
Full featured films.
Yeah. And they sort of set the template. So like as they're doing that, Marvel, they tried to make some movies, but they were widely like not successful. And we're talking like the early like 80s, early 70s. Like there is no notable superhero from Marvel that had like a widely popular movie at this time, like 70s.
And the old Spider-Man wasn't owned by the Marvel at that point?
Well, Spider-Man is owned by Marvel. So are you talking about like the early 2000s Spider-Man?
Yeah.
So we're going to get into that.
We're going to get into that.
So comic book sales. So I guess you have to think about it. Like movie studios make the movies, but they don't own the rights to those characters. The rights are owned by the comic book, like the comic book publishers. So there's like Marvel Comics, DC Comics. They would sell the rights to studios to make films or TV shows. In the early like 80s and 90s, there's a lot of popular, you might have seen the old like animated Spider-Man movies or like animated X-Men shows. I mean, like Spider-Man
like
shows, X-Men shows.
You see it on like a kids TV channel.
Yeah. So like so that's where Marvel was successful in making like animated shows. And there was also some TV shows that they had. Like they had a Hulk TV show with Lou Ferrigno. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It was more of like it was like a weird like show, but it was like an 80s like thing.
I wasn't quite around.
You weren't quite around. but Marvel was not successful in movies, to say the least. And comic book sales are not doing well at this time. So but DC is still doing successful. If you're thinking like early 90s, DC is releasing a lot of successful movies. Like Batman is really taking off in the 90s. There's a lot of those like older like Batman, like George Clooney Batman. That's all like 90s, 80s, 90s. So Marvel starts to sell the rights to their movies, thinking we're not doing anything with this. We're failing as a company. So let's like sell off some of these properties to different studios. Because there's like a thought that there is potential there. So this is happening in the early 90s. A lot of Marvel's properties now are being sold off. So that's where you get how like Sony owned the right to Spider-Man.
Got it.
Fox owned the right to like X-Men and like all of the X-Men mutant characters.
Oh, that's true.
So
that was a little series going on.
Yeah. So in early 2000s, that's where you had like the early Spider-Man movies that you mentioned. There was also the early X-Men movies. Mm-hmm. So in the early 2000s, that's where Marvel was, I guess Marvel properties were becoming successful in those like standalone movies. But nothing like connected. Mm-hmm. So everything is separate. So like Spider-Man, let's say if you're reading a comic book, Spider-Man lives in the same world as the X-Men. He lives in the same world as like the Fantastic Four, like these other characters.
But as separate movies owned by separate entities, they are not in the same universe.
Exactly. So like let's say Sony, they own the right to Spider-Man and Spider-Man related characters. So they couldn't bring in anybody else.
X-Men characters at all.
Same with Fox. Fox were making X-Men movies, but they couldn't bring in Spider-Man because it was different. The only thing that could have happened is if the studios decided to work together, make some partnership. That's what's happening now. But back then, that was not happening. It wasn't even a thought. But you do have a lot of successful superhero movies in the early 2000s. Marvel in the early 2000s regains the rights to so basically when they sell these rights to these characters, they're on like it's based on a contract. So if a studio doesn't make a film or if they don't use that character for a couple years, the rights revert back to Marvel. So Marvel Studios, which was their like film and television branch. So in the early 2000s, Marvel gets the rights back to Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man.
All of which were movies that preceded the MCU.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they get the rights to those, but those movies
they lose it after they like their contract's up.
So there's a very popular producer that he was he worked on a lot of the early movies from the 2000s, like the Spider-Man movie that you mentioned, the X-Men movies. He was like a producer behind the scenes on a lot of those movies. Marvel Studios takes him on. His name is Kevin Feige. I'll post an article in the show notes. There's like an article that talks about his life and how he right now is one of the like highest paid like executive producers like in all of Hollywood. He is Marvel Studios right now. Like he is like the creative like
power behind the scenes going on.
And I guess to just touch on him, the only thing that is like significant about him is that he is like a fan of the comics. So like he, instead of being some executive who is just wanting to make movies, he actually knows like who these characters are. So a lot of the stuff that he had brought to the table is coming from like a fan's perspective.
Okay.
But that being said, they take a big risk in 2008. They make Iron Man. You've probably watched that, I would think, maybe. Or you know who Iron Man is.
I know who Iron Man is. I think I watched the first one.
Yeah. But this movie was a big risk because, one, it was Marvel Studios' first movie. And also, it was starring Robert Downey Jr., who at the time was just recovering his reputation as a Hollywood actor. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with his life, but he was actually like an alcoholic, a drug addict, very controversial in Hollywood.
Oh, serious?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
There's stories about him where he like was coked out and broke into somebody's home and woke up like in someone's home and was like arrested.
And look at him now.
Something interesting is the director of the first Iron Man movie, Jon Favreau, he wanted Robert Downey Jr. because the character of Iron Man was an alcoholic. So he thought, if we're going to make a movie about someone who is like a recovering alcoholic who's trying to make himself better, we should pick someone who truly experienced that. and that's, I feel like that idea that he brought of like picking a actor who embodies the character really set the precedent for the rest of the movies, because a lot of the actors they chose are actors who are either a fan of the character or they are the character they portray. So like off screen, they are not that different from who they are playing. But this movie comes out in 2008, and it's widely successful. And it's widely successful and critically successful, given that it also came out in the same year as The Dark Knight, which is the Batman movie where it was Heath Ledger's like Joker performance, which won him an Oscar. So this movie still shined, given that it came out in like a summer of like a much bigger movie.
Yeah.
So that came out, and in 2009, Disney, lovely Disney, they purchased Marvel Studios. So there's a lot to be said if there was really a plan for these movies to become like connected. At the end of the first Iron Man movie, Samuel L. Jackson has like a post-credit scene where he meets Iron Man and he tells him they're trying to put a team together. And I believe the scene was deleted, but there's a scene where he mentions mutants and like web slinging characters. But these are all characters that are at this time still owned by Fox and Disney. So they were mentioning things that weren't really possible at that time.
Okay.
But they were setting up an idea of
was this supposed to be public knowledge at this time that Disney was going to buy the rights out for all these characters?
Well, Disney bought Marvel Studios, so Marvel at this time like owned it.
The rights.
Yeah. So it was public when Disney purchased them. I think what was not fully known is like what they were planning, like what the
whole MCU, the whole universe,
MCU,
bringing the characters together and making these films.
So I'll just talk about like the first Avengers movie, which I don't know if you saw either.
That I did.
You said, yeah.
Yeah. It was with the villain Loki.
Loki, yes.
Loki, that's how you pronounce it.
So that movie came out in 2012. So if you're thinking of the timeline and the characters that I mentioned, Iron Man comes out in 2008.
Okay.
The Incredible Hulk comes out in 2009, but The Incredible Hulk is owned by Universal. But it comes out, this is the first time we're saying this, it comes out in partnership with Marvel Studios. So like Marvel Studios helped produce the movie, but it's the rights and everything is owned to Universal. So Universal gets all the profit from that film. But I think Marvel was just viewing it as a partnership with like bringing the characters together. So basically at the end of that first Incredible Hulk movie, Iron Man appears. Robert Downey Jr. He shows up at like the end of that movie.
Is that the first film released by MCU? I mean, released by Disney?
Well, technically it's Universal.
Universal.
Yeah. So I think the next films that come out are in 2011. So there's a little bit of a break. Those are Disney Marvel movies now.
Okay. And is that when we say Universal, sorry, is that a separate company or that's still under Disney, right?
No. Universal Studios is a separate Universal the film company.
Because I'm thinking about like Universal Studios over in Disneyland.
No, Universal Studios is a separate park.
Okay,
but yeah, it's
separate
in Orlando.
park.
It's in Orlando.
Context here: I've never been to Florida. I've never been to Florida.
That's a good question, honestly. But yeah, so
Universal Studios is separate from Disney, but it's right there.
It's right there in Orlando. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. I always thought it was part of Disney.
Something funny too is Universal Studios has a Marvel section.
Yeah.
But so does Disney, because Disney. So Universal, and this is along with what we're talking about, how like Marvel Comics was selling off rights. They sold off like theme park rights to Universal, but Disney owns the cinematic rights to like make rides based off of their own films. So in Universal they have a Marvel area, but it's just Marvel Comics. Like the characters there are just Marvel characters, but Disney, they're the MCU characters.
Interesting.
So like in the Disney park they're dressed up like they are in the movies. In the Universal park they're dressed up more like
how they are in the comic books.
Yeah, so it looks a little more cartoony in the
Got it. Now, which came first? Which park came first?
Oh, Universal. Yeah.
Universal was there first?
Oh, well, I'm talking about the Marvel.
No, I mean, which park?
I think Disney.
Disney was there first
Disney
before.
was there first,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. But yeah, so after The Incredible Hulk, then it's 2000. Well, after The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2 comes out. Just another film like continuing this. And then 2011, you have Thor and then Captain America. So now we have all the characters, the 3 that they gained the rights back. Films are out. And then plus Incredible Hulk. Each of these films have like little things that are connecting them, but they're all standalone movies.
Like end credit scenes, things
end
like
credit
that?
scenes would connect them.
Okay.
Maybe like a character that appears in one appears in the other,
Okay.
but you could watch it and not have to understand context for anything else.
Got it.
And then Avengers comes out. Avengers came out in 2012, the year after these Thor and Captain America. Avengers is now the first time that something like this is ever happening, where you could say 4 distinct franchises, because like those individual characters are carrying like the franchise of their character, and they're different movies. They all come together into one movie. And it's also a big risk because I guess for context, like these characters are not, they're popular in comics, but they're not popular to like the general public. So like, let's say Captain America, you may not have even known who Captain America was if it wasn't for like, well, now the MCU is more popular. So you might have seen like a picture of him, but let's say 2012
Captain
Joshi.
America. No, I knew Captain America
Well,
back then.
they're just not, but I'm just saying they're not as iconic as Spider-Man. Like when you think of Marvel, you would think of Spider-Man. You would think of like Wolverine.
Maybe like cartoons of Captain America made him pretty prominent.
Yeah.
But at least in my childhood.
In your childhood of Captain America?
I think. Like were there cartoon shows of Captain America out?
No, but he would appear in like a Spider-Man show or like something like that sometimes. Yeah.
Child Joshi. Child Joshi. I feel like, well, I was more familiar with Spider-Man in like the story behind it and everything, like Uncle Ben and everything, because I watched those movies growing up. But I feel like the face and the like, if Captain America was to pop up, it was obvious.
I guess so, but I mean, it's also like his colors and everything is so like iconic,
recognizable.
Because he like is the American flag. But regardless, like the most popular, most identifiable characters, if you're thinking like DC, you think like Superman, Batman, it would be like Spider-Man. That was always like the most popular character. And, like,
to me,
the highest selling like character in comics was always Spider-Man. But Marvel didn't even own the rights to him. So these characters are not super popular. The films are doing well though. And the first Avengers film does very well. So that kind of changes things now because it's the first time this is happening. It is successful. And now what happens next?
You tell me.
Well, I won't go into every movie, but the thing that I want to talk more about, like Kevin Feige, is that he is very much in control over like the directions of these films. In the early ages, in the early stages of these movies, there were more like Disney executives being involved. Marvel Studios wasn't its own like. Right now, like as of today, Marvel Studios is a distinct like branch from Disney. Back then, it was controlled by Disney. So like Disney executives had a big role into what was going on in those movies. So for example, the Black Widow movie that we recently saw was an idea that was not allowed to be considered because they didn't think a female-led movie would perform well. Black Panther, another character that they owned the rights at this time, also thrown out the window because an African-American character. So a lot of that is happening at the start, which a lot of those details come out like years later once a lot of these executives are not like
involved in the decisions anymore. Yeah.
And a lot of them, they retire, like they're not as involved anymore, where now you're hearing like, let's say Black Widow, which recently came out, we're hearing now it was an idea that was like, let's say 10 years ago that they wanted to do, but they couldn't. But it comes out, and Kevin Feige, he thought, yeah,
Yeah, real quick. In the early stages, wasn't it becoming public or at least leaks to some extent as to what sequence or chronology these films were to come out in?
that's yeah. So when the first couple of movies up to Avengers comes out, there really is. It's just it. We knew that Avengers would come out. That's like as much as people knew. After Avengers comes out, they would every Comic-Con they would announce like the phases. So like let's say all the movies we just went over was phase 1. And then after Avengers came out, they announced phase 2, which would be like a new lineup of movies, mostly sequels to the characters we just saw, and then some new properties that they're like releasing movies for. And then I guess the way that it would work, it would be all of these individual movies and then an Avengers movie. And that would be the end. And then next phase, individual movies, Avengers movie, phase would end, and then so on. But something that Kevin Feige was really emphasizing was that he thought superhero movies, like any genre of film, like James Bond or like anything, people will get tired of them. Like if you do it so much, there will be a sense of not enjoying it as much because
you lose the novelty of it.
Yeah. So he was really pushing that each of the movies should now fit into distinct genres. So you have some sequels come out that, let's say Captain America, his sequels end up becoming more political dramas in a superhero world. You have some movies coming out that are straight up comedies. Doctor Strange, which you watched, is a very mystical, like magic, like not really comparable to some of these other movies. So you're starting to see
a lot of variety
across
the films.
Yeah. So Marvel is trying to diversify what they're making because they're making so much. If you think about these early movies, it was like spread out through the years. Following the first Avengers movie, they're doing 2 movies per year, consistently. And then even after that, that's if we're talking now, this year, 4 movies are coming out.
In 2021.
In 2021. And this is with COVID delays.
Yeah.
2020, 4 was supposed to come out as well, but now they were just all pushed a year later. But we have 4 movies, and we're already halfway through the year, and 3 more are coming out at some point.
Interesting. Do you? I guess we don't have to get into it now.
Oh, we'll go for it.
I was going to ask about with the delay, because I saw like Black Widow was completely done with the filming of Black Widow was completely done before COVID even became a thing.
Yeah, I think the film was largely done in like 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and it involved going to a lot of different countries. With that, like how does that impact timelines? Because I would think from then on, like most of the work could just be done at home.
Well, that's a really good question because like there is a lot of work that they were able to do at home, like finishing the editing of a movie. But I think what they lock themselves into is because all these movies are interconnected, they have to come out in a certain order. So let's say with COVID, not only were the movies pushed back, all of the shows that they were making on Disney Plus were pushed back because Marvel, I guess from a company standpoint, they view these films and movies coming out in a certain timeline as it's strategic. It's not just like, oh, we'll release them whenever. Because they could have released, like, let's say Black Widow came out. Let's say if another film was edited first, they could release it first, but they won't because it has to come out in the order.
Everything follows the same sequence. And that means too, if they planned on making a film in the future that was to be timed like a month after Black Widow, but they didn't finish the filming of it, then they would have to hold off until like they can actually come together and do the filming. That probably impact timelines as well. Yeah,
so like a lot of the movies that they're filming right now were delayed because of COVID, but everything was pushed back
to meet those timelines.
Yeah, to meet those. Yeah, but yeah, so I guess that's like relevant too because something that I think is like interesting is despite trying to diversify, they kind of lock themselves into restrictive patterns. So like the films have to come out in a certain order to make sense. and two, the films have to be interconnected now. So like something that I find interesting, and we could get into it when we talk about Black Widow, but there has started to become anger amongst people who are fans of the movies, where if a movie isn't connected enough, they're mad.
Mm-hmm.
If it's connected too much, they'll be mad because they're like, oh, you're just using the popularity of the franchise to make us watch this movie. So there's really no way for Marvel to please everyone right now. Despite that, they have made some films that are like extremely standalone. I don't know if you've watched Guardians of the Galaxy.
No, I haven't.
We should definitely watch those. They're just movies that take place in space. They're not even on Earth. They do connect to the universe because they touch on characters who become, I guess, the villains of the stories later on. But if you watch Guardians of the Galaxy, you need no context for what came before because it's just its own thing. Mm-hmm. In space.
I mean, the characters have no way of.
The characters don't even know.
Knowing each other.
Which is interesting. But I wrote down some of the different genres. So they have like space movies like that, magic movies like Doctor Strange, team up movies where like there was a Thor movie that came out where Hulk they brought into it. So he's like another character. Instead of giving him his own movie, he's just in a Thor movie.
That's interesting. It's like it reminds me a lot of like bringing together Very Odd Parents and what was the other one?
Jimmy Neutron.
Jimmy Neutron, that's right.
So people make jokes about that because they did it first. But and I guess like speaking of that, you probably remember watching that as a little kid, how special that felt.
Yeah, that was exciting.
And now...
And you're watching the commercials on Nickelodeon. It was Nickelodeon, right?
Yeah.
Leading up to like all the promotions saying like, oh, we're bringing the two together. So you wait for like 9 p.m. for that movie to launch or that like 1 hour segment to launch. As a little kid, like with all your friends to talk about next morning in class, that shit was exciting. That got you thriving, man. So it happened with Hulk and Thor.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But
I don't know if the lead up is that as great as being a child with Jimmy Neutron and Timmy Turner.
Oh, the lead up for those? Do you mean the lead up for those isn't, or the lead up for Marvel isn't as great as those?
As a child.
Oh, yeah. I guess as a child, it feels a lot more special.
It does.
Yeah. And I guess it's interesting. Children now, I wonder how they feel, given that these movies already exist and these characters are together. There really is no special, like it's not new. It's just exists.
You're not experiencing it in the moment. Yeah. And myself, I didn't experience that in the moment because I wasn't following along.
Mm-hmm. The thing I was just going to touch on was the Sony. So I guess Sony, Disney, Fox. Mm-hmm. As I've gone through all these movies, at the same time, Sony is still making Spider-Man movies, and Fox is making X-Men movies.
Until what year?
The last X-Men movie came out in 2018. Well, that was like X-Men. They had like some side movies that I think one even came out last year, like a Fox-made X-Men movie. And for Spider-Man, the last like Sony not connected to Marvel Spider-Man movie was 2014, which was the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at what point were the rights over to Disney for Spider-Man? So
for Spider-Man, almost immediately after that Amazing Spider-Man 2 comes out, like let's say 2014 into 2015, Sony and Marvel are meeting trying to bring Spider-Man into the Marvel universe.
Okay. I do remember like the Amazing Spider-Man is not doing that well.
Exactly.
I watched those two movies.
Yeah. So that was the reason why they didn't bring that version of Spider-Man. That the second movie that came out like didn't do well. Mm-hmm. And I think even to touch on it, like all of these franchises are trying to do what Marvel is doing. So when that movie came out, if you ever rewatch it, you'll see that they're trying to set up like 5 different movies in that one movie. Like there's mentions of like there's like side characters introduced out of nowhere. There's like mentions of villains that aren't like introduced yet.
I remember the ending of one of the movies with a new villain just popping up. It was like Rhino or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they're doing too much. I think we're gonna. That's like one of the points I have, but we'll get to it. But a lot of studios are trying to copy what Marvel did, but they're trying to do it too quick. Because like based on what we talked about, like we're talking like 2008, 2009. Like it's a slow build up, but now studios are like,
Let's catch up.
In 2 movies, let's do it. But it's not the same.
You can't catch up that way.
But Sony and Marvel make a deal. In 2016, Spider-Man is in Captain America: Civil War.
And I think I saw that.
You probably have, yeah.
I think I watched that. Maybe not the whole thing, but part of it with you.
And that is also like a big, maybe not a precedent, but it's something big that happens because you have Sony and Marvel striking a deal now to have Spider-Man exist in a few Marvel movies. So in any movie that's Spider-Man, if he's in a Marvel movie, Marvel gets the profit. So Marvel gets like the merchandising rights, the profits from the film because it's a Marvel movie. Sony will be making their own Spider-Man movies with the new Spider-Man. He will exist in the Marvel universe. They can use Marvel characters, but it's a Sony movie. Sony gets the profit, but Marvel gets the merchandising profits. So that's the only caveat that Marvel struck. So Sony gets the profit from the tickets, the people buying the movie, but Marvel gets the toys, basically.
Everything else.
Yeah.
Everything else that comes as a byproduct of the movie coming out. So it's a Sony movie.
Yeah, but it's a Sony movie.
Captain America was a Sony movie.
No. Only the Spider-Man movies are like that. The Captain America is a Marvel movie that Spider-Man was featured in. So like that first movie, first movie, it was all Marvel.
They have a little bit of a crossover with the deal that they struck.
Yeah.
But any Spider-Man movies that come out are Sony movies.
Sony movies, yeah. So even the distribution rights are Sony. So on Disney Plus, that Spider-Man movie couldn't exist like on Disney Plus because it's not technically a Marvel movie.
What's the Spider-Man movies that have come out since? If
so
more than one?
Just 2. Homecoming, which you mentioned, and then No Way Home, which came out in 2017. Or no, sorry. Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home.
Far From Home,
Which came out in 2019.
Which is the one that was the cartoon version? Or
that was unrelated, but that's a Sony movie.
That's a Sony movie too.
Yeah. Sony movie.
That's the one with the soundtrack.
Multiverse. Oh yeah, and the good soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess something to add to the whole Sony thing too is recently, I think this came out like a month ago, Marvel and Sony struck a new deal where Sony films are now going to be on Disney Plus. So that includes the Spider-Man movies. So like Disney Plus now has distribution rights to Sony films. So now all the Spider-Man movies, including the early ones from 2000 with Tobey Maguire and the little the later one. Yeah, because those are all
like Spider-Man 1 through 3 and Amazing Spider-Mans.
Yeah. So those are going to be slowly rolled into Disney Plus.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
And maybe to touch on some...
That's yet to happen, though.
It's yet to happen, but people are thinking like it's going to lead in nicely because the idea that people think is going to happen is some of those old actors are going to be shuffled into the Marvel movies with some like alternate universe like storyline thing. But we'll get to that. I guess I'll just touch quickly.
Like the actors from like Green Goblin.
Yeah. The original actors, they want to... There's rumors that they're coming back.
Wow. Okay.
You probably remember Dr. Octopus?
Yeah.
He is coming back for the Spider-Man movie that's coming out later this year.
Oh,
Same actor.
Now I have like some sentimental value to watch this.
Same actor, and he claims that he's playing the same version of his character from 2000.
Oh, wow.
But I don't know how they're going to explain that. And it's interesting that you're interested in watching that.
Yeah.
Because something I wanted to touch upon was with the oversaturation of these movies, what they've been doing a lot of now is pulling in old characters. So like it's odd because they've been around for so long that there's almost nostalgia for themselves. Because let's say Iron Man came out over 10 years ago now, so there's nostalgia
to bring back old
characters from the original Iron Man. So
while like the initial plan or a lot of the initiatives early on was to bring novelty and like diversify with like different characters and let them have their own films too. They're kind of going back to like, let's resurface old films or old actors and many of these actors continue to show up in the films as we go along.
There are some that they're bringing, let's say that they haven't appeared for like 10 years.
Okay.
And they're bringing them back out of nowhere into a different movie. Almost as just a cute little thing for you. But, I remember that. Like now I want to see like what that person does. So yeah, it's like, it's interesting.
It helps perhaps like fans from before who may have lost interest over time, knowing now that some of the same characters that they loved from the past is coming back. Yeah.
And I think it's also to add maybe a new specialness, that maybe the specialness of these characters interacting in the same universe has been lost because it's been existing, but maybe bringing old characters brings new life, or, you know, bringing characters from a different franchise or like a different universe might spice it up a little bit.
Okay.
But I wanted to touch on something that I think that you would find interesting. The profits of these films.
Ooh, this is what we're talking about, the money.
Something that's so I looked up the top like grossing films. Something like straight out of the gate that's interesting is almost all of these are Disney films.
The top grossing films are all Disney.
Of all time are all Disney. I don't know if Titanic is owned by Disney. That might be something I should look up. But
like top
grossing movies of all time
from the box office of all time.
Yeah. So I'll go down the list. That number one is Avatar, that came out in 2009, a James Cameron movie.
That's Disney?
It's owned by Disney now.
It wasn't at the time?
I don't think so.
So would they have gotten the profits then?
I guess not, but they did re-release the film not too long ago. So
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so that movie came out in 2009. 2.8 billion as of now. It's number one. The number two movie is Avengers Endgame, which is the most recent Avengers movie that has come out.
Yeah. Back to Avatar real quick, because I remember Avatar being such a huge film in the box office. What made that so successful, if you have any like background?
I do know the technology that because you probably remember it's all like the blue people. Something like that has not been done at like up to that point. And I think also the movie was released like almost widely in like 3D in like IMAX. So it was just like new for the time. It was like not only was it I don't really like the movie, but people like the movie, but it was just a technological like wonder that like that came out.
What they were able to bring to film.
Yeah.
Never being seen before.
Because you also have characters who for the majority of the film are like CGI, and they mix like CGI and real life stuff. So it was just the production behind it was a big part of it too.
Brought a lot of value to it. Value to its success. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's still the number one movie. They actually lost. So I mentioned Avengers Endgame, which came out in 2019. That movie, when it came out, had the largest. It was the largest grossing film in like the opening weekend. It passed Avatar as being the top grossing film. It came out in 2019. Avatar came out in 2009, 10 years ago. 10-year anniversary. Avatar re-releases later that summer into the fall. Now they passed Avengers. So I don't know.
Do they?
But at this time, it's like a Disney-owned movie
off of its old grossing income.
Yeah, they
it just adds on top. Yeah. Okay, so that's unfair.
It is. And I guess maybe in 10 years, Avengers Endgame might re-release and it might pass. It might be just an endless competition. But I just find that funny.
That's just to have the
top
have spot.
Yeah.
That's just to have the top spot. Now, do they account for inflation?
I don't think so. I think they're just counting for like the
whatever the total is at that time.
Whatever's being like reported.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, it is, I guess, a lot to speak of how much Avatar made like its opening weekend. But you also have to think it's been around for 10 years. So I think the price that they're including is also like
across
Yeah,
the 10
the
years.
10 years, yeah.
Well, what do you count as like what can add to that dollar amount? Would that be
I think they're
also
including like it being purchased, like any profit that's being made on people purchasing that movie, whether it's like in theaters or like DVD sales.
okay.
Yeah. But just to go through the others, Titanic is number 3. And these are all in the 2 billions. Star Wars, another Disney-owned property, number 4. And then Avengers Infinity War, which came out in 2018. So it's like 2018, 2019, both Avengers movies were back to back. Both are in the top 5 most profitable of all time. That was a lot.
They have to adjust for inflation
Yeah.
to have a fair comparison.
I think it's not, they probably don't, but yeah, like it's the way they're showing it might not be like accurate, like, or a fair comparison. But yeah, I mean, these movies are obviously very profitable. I touched a little bit on like the attempts that people have made to copy it. But Marvel themselves are also doing different stuff. So you've probably heard of like the Disney Plus movies. Those are Disney Plus shows rather, like limited series of characters who probably wouldn't get their own movie or getting like a 6-episode TV show. So that's like the big thing that started this year.
Okay.
And I guess I think maybe you watched Daredevil, right, on Netflix?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I've watched the Netflix like DC series,
Marvel series.
Marvel series.
So like Daredevil.
Wait. Okay, yeah. We have Daredevil, we have Jessica Jones, we have Luke Cage, and we have the other one that didn't do as well,
The
Iron Fist.
Yeah.
Thank you for the hint.
Those characters, the way the shows were made, it was supposed to take place in the same universe as Marvel. But those were Netflix made shows. So Disney actually sold the rights to these characters to Netflix to make those shows.
Why?
I think these were also just characters that they weren't too interested in making. So I guess context, like Disney during this time that I went over all these films, they weren't too concerned over TV. They weren't really doing much in TV.
So now that they have more of a TV series initiative this past year, this is something that they've been more interested in. Are they going to? Will there be any possibility of buying the rights away from Netflix?
So Netflix works the same way as the movies do, where if they don't make a show,
if they don't continue,
if they don't continue it, the rights revert back. Released. As of now, I think Daredevil has reverted back, and like Luke Cage has reverted back. It's based on like the amount of years since the last season came out. So I think Jessica Jones had a recent season, like maybe 2 years ago. So it might be like, let's say 3 years. So like that one is still not there. So
we aren't really expecting anything new from Netflix anymore.
No Marvel
related series.
So Marvel wanted to consolidate a lot of the film stuff to their own Disney Plus like wing now. So like Marvel had other shows like on ABC that was like a live action show. That show also ended. So there's all these characters from these shows that happen in like different mediums. Most of them are not considered to be a part of, even though they were portrayed as taking place in the same universe, Marvel doesn't consider it as canon unless they bring any of the characters back. So if they choose to bring anybody from, let's say Daredevil, he could appear, but they haven't done anything like that yet. But yeah, that's kind of what Marvel is doing now with like branching more into TV, and also with the idea of bringing in old characters, which we kind of touched on. I guess to talk about what might be the next thing they're building to, is potentially there's a storyline in the comics where multiple universes collide and you have like different versions of each of the characters all together in one universe, in one like storyline. This has been done in that Spider-Man movie you mentioned where there's like multiple different Spider-Man, the animated one. The thought is that's what Marvel is going to now, where they're going to build up to like an event series. So like the 2 Avengers movies that I mentioned, the two that are the most profitable.
Yeah.
Those movies were the conclusion to like a almost 20 film franchise. The storylines that were set up ended in those films. So like any films that are coming up now are setting up something new. It's not related to anything. It is continuing the story, but the main story that happened in those original 20 something films ended with Avengers Endgame. That was like the conclusion of this first chapter. So they think the next like big event will be pulling in Tobey Maguire or like Andrew Garfield, Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, Daredevil. I mean, or maybe Daredevil from the Netflix shows, pulling them all into one story and having that be the new thing that's special. Because now we've already been exposed to having all these characters together. But what if we had all these characters together with characters from different franchises?
Something that they haven't been able to do.
Yeah.
Especially given the rights that are being released now.
So it's in like a special spot now where like a lot of the rights are coming back where they could do something like that. So that's kind of the thought.
The theory that's coming on about what might be next.
Yeah. But I did want to talk about like some failures to like replicate what Marvel did. I wrote down like some, there's some like.
You touched on it a little bit with like the Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man's failing at being able to pull in like, let's bring in all these different characters, all these different story arcs that will allude to what's to come. That has failed.
And they are not unique in doing that.
Okay.
So I kind of wanted to go over some other cinematic universes and see if you even knew that they existed. Are you familiar at all with Universal doing a monster verse? And this is like in our lifetime. There were films that were supposed to be a part of a monster verse.
What is a monster verse?
Exactly.
What would be, or is this a superhero universe, or is it just like we have all these different monsters that might be coming out, like Dracula?
That's it. So
wait. There was a Netflix show or movie, Transylvania.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
Okay.
But so Universal owns the rights to all the classic like monster, like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, like all those movies were made by Universal.
There were so many failed Frankenstein movies.
Yeah.
Was that part of any of these part of Monsterverse?
It probably was a planned film. If I remember correctly, they had promoted a cast of characters that would include like Frankenstein, a werewolf, the Invisible Man, Dracula, and I think maybe the goal was to have a Avengers team up type thing, but it would be with classic movie monsters teaming up for who knows why.
Yeah.
The only movie that actually came out that was supposed to be a part of that was a new Mummy movie, which I don't know if you ever. I didn't watch it. It was with Tom Cruise. It was like a reboot of the Mummy franchise, which was another set of movies that came out in the early 2000s, which I'm not sure if you've ever seen.
No.
Okay.
No.
But
That's
that was a failed attempt.
Oh, I might watch these before the MCU.
I mean, there's less of them to watch, so it might be interesting to see.
Yeah. Just to let you guys know, we are still in Joe Rogan's back office. So if you are hearing any background sound, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Joe Rogan's a little busy right now.
Yeah. I think he's making us dinner.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
So the DC heroes, they also sort of failed in an attempt to replicate a Marvel kind of thing. So you probably know of Superman.
I do know of Superman.
There was a Man of Steel movie.
Yep, I'm aware.
After that, there was a Batman versus Superman movie.
Yep, I watched that.
And then there was a Justice League movie. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, I did not.
So they basically
Batman versus Superman, I think, was the last one I watched.
Yeah. Okay. Did you ever watch Wonder Woman?
I don't think so. Okay. I remember my mom talking about it because woman character and everything. So she was very excited about it. I don't remember if I watched it at that time. I did watch all the Dark Knights, or not the Dark Knights, all the Batman movies, just so I can watch the And this in the part some of the more recent Superman movies, so I can watch the Batman versus Superman. So I do remember that I watched Batman and Superman movies
Before
in the lead
watching.
up. Yeah, Batman versus
Oh,
Superman.
interesting.
And then like I closed off with that, and then like
Never
put it
watched.
behind. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, that movie came out and it was okay, but Batman v Superman. Did you like that movie? Do you remember?
A little bit. I remember a little bit. I
Yeah.
remember the actor who was the villain. What's his name?
Jesse Eisenberg from The Social Network was
Yep.
Lex Luthor.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember that being a great part of the film.
I guess something interesting, if you think about it, of the series of those movies, it was Man of Steel, Superman. The very next movie is Batman v Superman. So they're introducing Batman for the first time in a crossover movie. So if you think about it, how I mentioned Marvel, the slow buildup.
They right away.
Second movie also includes Wonder Woman. She's in that movie as well, in Batman v Superman. And they also, in that same movie, show teasers for The Flash and Cyborg and Aquaman. All in one movie.
I think that's how I was aware of Cyborg.
Yeah.
That's probably the only reason I knew of Cyborg.
I think they show like him for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really see how they were trying to rush to catch up. They were trying to set up like a team in like 2 movies, which a lot of people, I think it's an interesting thing, because if you think about those as like standalone as a movie, like that could pass. But I think since Marvel exists, people are kind of spoiled to expect a buildup. They're spoiled to expect like each of these characters to get development on their own and then team up. So like
now
it's hard to say if what they did was wrong. It didn't work commercially, but it's hard to say if the reason was because they had a bad idea or if people are just too used to what Marvel did that they won't accept anything different.
The bar has been set.
Yeah.
So it's either the bar has been set or they did a shitty job.
Yeah. Which I feel like is the hard thing for some of these other like attempts. It's hard to say if what they're doing is wrong, because Marvel set like you said, they set the bar. There has been nobody else to do it before like that, so it's hard to try to replicate it.
But out of the different universes, they probably have come the closest.
Yeah.
Where are they now?
With DC?
Yeah.
So the Justice League movie came out in 2017. They recently released a director's cut of that movie this year, because the director claimed that Warner Brothers didn't let him show the movie that he made. So he instead, the movie we saw in 2017 was 2 hours. He instead released a 4-hour movie on HBO Max.
Oh, fun.
Two extra hours of cut content, saying that was his version of the movie.
I'm going to watch it.
Some have actually said it's better, but it's also a 4-hour movie.
Have you watched it?
I did watch it.
Of course you did.
Yeah. And I don't know how I feel about it, but it is interesting what Marvel has done to franchises, what people are expecting of what a franchise should be and like could be.
And there's nothing close to measuring up right now.
Nothing has ever gotten close. Never, especially if you think about like profits and like how widely known they are now, like across the world. Nothing has gotten as close. There are other film franchises like Fast and Furious, which I mentioned in another episode.
Oh, I love that.
They are a long-running franchise. They have made attempts at like spin-off movies. So like you could see they're trying to do like the Marvel thing, like they're like, it's the Fast and Furious movies, but they're trying to branch out and like have different characters have their own movie.
Oh no,
it didn't really work.
No, not Fast and Furious.
Let me see if I have any other ones that are like noteworthy. Well, I guess the other thing that I wanted to mention was even TV shows now are falling into this collective universe bubble where like all these properties think in order to be successful we should connect to something else. And like Let's say instead of just being one franchise, why can't we be 3 franchises all interconnected? So it's like viewing it as a way to maybe increase your profit by not just being one thing. You can connect to something else and you both share that audience. There's been like DC TV shows that are like regular cable shows that have tried to do like crossover stuff. And I think they've been successful, but it's also, it's on cable. So like, it's not a very popular medium. Disney, I think, is the only one that is maybe doing something different with their television shows by having them exclusively like streaming, like they're not airing on TV. Like no other, I guess they're pioneering that as well, because no other franchise has now said, okay, we've done the movie thing, let's continue to do that and also make interconnected TV shows. They're also on their own little island doing that. So I know that was
you think this is the standard now with film, and well, do you think it's the standard now in film? And like when you think about businesses bringing change to an industry, this is the current day big change for film.
I think let's say if we're looking back on this like many years from now, it will be the biggest like shift in Hollywood and like the way movies are being made, which many people will say in a bad way.
Why so?
Because now studios are more likely to want to make a movie that's either based on a pre-existing property or a movie that will connect like to a future franchise instead of supporting a standalone movie. So let's say me as an aspiring director, I'm more likely to get a job with Disney if I'm saying I want to make a super epic man movie, and I want him to connect to these other movies and build this universe.
It creates a monopoly here.
Yeah.
It's hard for a new competitors to really come up because you have what's already a brand to be able to just support new characters.
And I think it's also it's hard for studios to view like financial value in supporting like a standalone individual film. Because let's say if I want to make a Papa Loves Mambo, that's it, just one Papa Loves Mambo. A studio would say, well, we could make it a trilogy. Why don't we also do a spin-off for Jake? Why don't we also do a spin-off for Alex Lago? Like they view it as, why view it as one thing when we can make it 10 things, like a 10-year arc. Like, and it's just
which is fair, because you're thinking about creating content for the long term rather than like just here's one idea and then we'll wait until the next bright idea comes down the line.
Which, I mean, there's nothing wrong. I think like the movies connecting is cool. It's interesting, but I think there's a lot of strife against that because it's limiting what like an independent director, what their career would look like in Hollywood now. It's harder to get like a standalone movie made.
This does like bring the exploration of like a lot of fan based spin-offs can now create now with what Disney now has the money to actually do, where they're taking films to be trilogies or longer span sets of films to come out and all the spin-offs to come off with it. And it sounds like, well, earlier films wouldn't be able to ever explore this because they wouldn't have the resources or maybe even the thought or the preparation in the brand to be able to do something like this. But there would always be like those fans who were loyal to a specific film or a little trilogy that ever may have happened and like considered what's to the fan fiction behind it, like what may have been. So like this explores a little bit of it seems like it explores a little bit of the fun behind the fan fiction that and it makes it into an actual full featured film or TV series. Yeah,
because you're also seeing like you're not limiting those stories to just a one-off thing. So like these characters continue, so you're able to explore like multiple different things, multiple different stories. But it's usually, I guess, in terms of Marvel, it's like based on like the comics that came before. Like they are bringing those stories. So it's another nostalgia thing where they know people have read this comic book. So we'll make that comic book into a movie. Something that I didn't even mention is Marvel was so popular, Marvel Studios, the films, that the films now are affecting the comics. The comics are trying to make their characters more like the movie characters. So like someone like Iron Man in the comics originally was not a funny character. He was just a genius. And now if you read an Iron Man comic, he's...
I didn't know they were still releasing comics.
They are. But they're not as like... I think comics now... they're almost like a lead-in or a tie-in for the movies or shows. Like it's just an additional form of content now. And they're being made, they're not made in the same universe, but they're made to align with the films. So it's just an additional reason for you to want to buy it and continue that profit.
But now there's a lot more interest in the films than there are in the comics.
Yeah.
And it's like the comic, I mean, it's the film that's the garners all the attention, and if you really desire more content, you have the comics now.
And I guess it's interesting because now you have, I've read comic books, but I'm not like a comic book like nerd or whatever, but I have watched every Marvel movie. So let's say like 10 years from now, I will be a resource to like kids who are interested in Marvel because I have watched all these movies. So like, let's say right now, the people who are like informing like what their theories on what the movies will be are all comic book people who have read all the comic books. But now it's like, as it goes on, comic books are less popular, but now you have all these people who are like diehard fans who have watched everything. So like we're becoming the generation to inform the next generation.
At least you are.
At least me.
At least you are.
But
it's also interesting to think that it's often the thought that the book's always better than the movie, and here it's reversing it now.
I mean, I guess the movies are more financially profitable, so the comics are just aligning because of that. There is an argument to be made that some of the storylines from the comics have not been accurately done justice or whatever, but that's like what you mentioned. Like sometimes a book goes more into a story than what a movie can do.
Never do, yeah.
That'll just always be the case. Like they can never do everything that is done in a book. But,
that's true.
To get to Black Widow, because
we do have to talk about Black Widow.
I just want to everything that I have set up. Black Widow as a movie doesn't really connect to anything. I think it's interesting that was the most recent movie you saw. I wanted you to watch the last Avengers movie because
Endgame.
It's a big tie-in movie with all these like characters from different franchises, and I knew it would be confusing for you. But this Black Widow movie is pretty much independent. There's some references to other stuff, but it's pretty much independent. So
yeah, it wasn't.
Give me your thoughts.
Yeah. Black Widow was great. And they had some beautiful characters too. Two main characters were pretty beautiful.
Oh, you mean that beautiful?
That beautiful. Yeah. I mean, and they did a great job, of course, too. And it didn't have too many references, so that was good. I guess I was confused a little bit as to what Black Widow was for a while going through the movie, because there wasn't really much context given to that. And I think someone who is more familiar with Marvel would be able to know that coming into the movie. Well, I didn't have that context. I had to look a little bit more into it after the fact, because I still didn't even know after the fact what Black Widow really meant. And it seems like Black Widows are what comes from the antidotes. I'm not before the antidotes. Like
they're like the soldiers.
The soldiers from what's being passed around and having your mind controlled and all that stuff. Yeah. I thought Black Widow was just the character itself, the one character. And she was the Black Widow. That's what I thought.
Can I ask you, did you, watching the movie, did you feel like a sense of suspense on like not knowing what would happen? Like, I know it's a movie, so you always know it's going to work out in the end, but did you feel, did the stressful moments or like the action scenes feel like they had weight?
That's a good question. I thought the action scenes were just very exciting. Like when you see Natasha fighting the robot, the one who has been so mind controlled, the daughter of Dreykov. That was just a very exciting scene because like, how the fuck do you fight midair? Now like suspense as to like, will this actually work out? Maybe when you realize that it seemed like Dreykov was one step ahead when he really wasn't. In those moments, it did feel a little suspenseful as to that it wasn't really going to work out. That like their plan has been compromised, and you didn't realize that they actually have planned out steps ahead already. Like knowing that if you break your nasal nerve, that you can release the pheromones that was blocking any attack, things like that.
Like that actually surprised me too. Like the whole even just before that, where who was the name of her friend Melina, who was like the older Black Widow, and she captures Red Guardian, like the
Red Guardian's the name of who?
The guy with the beard. I don't remember what his character's name was.
The guy with the beard.
Alexei.
The father, or
the father figure. Yeah.
Father figure. Yeah, exactly. Who captured Alexei?
It was like the older mom Black Widow. I think.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But like, remember, like when she turns on them, it's really Natasha because she's like wearing.
That was a complete surprise. That was
cool.
a complete surprise, and it was also a complete surprise that. I mean, they worked together.
Yeah.
Like you thought she was turning them in, or at least I thought they were turning.
No, I did too.
Whatever her name was, the mother figure.
Yeah.
Was turning them in because she seemed so loyal to the Red Room or the whole Dreykov authoritative control he had over everyone. Yeah, exactly. It was dark. It was dark.
It was.
Yeah. Well, it was so dark seeing the Red Room scene like early on in the movie. Like, what the fuck are you watching? And Jake, our friend, he like calls out, "Oh, I've seen worse on like the dark web."
Oh,
I'm like that's like all the like vibes I'm getting right now, like dark web vibes.
Well, there's also there's a scene in the movie which I don't know if you caught on. Like they mention that all the Black Widows receive hysterectomies. Like they're not allowed to have children, so they all receive like forced hysterectomies, where they like remove their uterus. But when the younger Black Widow, Yelena, I think her name is.
Yelena, yeah, that's right.
When she's describing that this happened to her, they do it as a joke. I don't know if you caught that on.
No.
It's like a very one-off like joking thing, but just felt kind of weird because it's
what part of the film?
It's when they first pick up Alexei from the prison and they're in the helicopter. I think he makes a comment about like hoping one day for his daughters to have children, and then she's like, "Oh well, I can't have children on account of the forced hysterectomy I received as a child."
I didn't catch that.
And then it's just like he makes like a joking comment, but it's just like a one-off thing where just felt weird. But other than that, I asked you about like if you found things to be suspenseful because Natasha's dead at the end of the film. I don't know if you stayed to watch the after credits, but
yeah, I did.
Okay, so
yeah, you get the tombstone.
Yelena goes to her tombstone. Black Widow, Natasha, she died in the movie that came out just before this, and they made her a movie after that. Anyways.
She's part of the Avengers.
She is.
Yeah.
And in the last
Avengers that was like also context that was tough for me to connect.
Yeah.
They alluded to it a ton, so like I was able to put the pieces together. But like beforehand, I didn't know she was part of the Avengers.
Yeah. So I guess it's interesting that's the movie that you saw, because like someone not having even seen the previous movies, you wouldn't even know that she's dead. So you would just be watching this being like, oh cool, it's a Black Widow movie. So, I'm excited to see where she goes next.
So I guess in the eyes of someone who knows the history here or the previous has watched the past 500,000 movies
it feels
from,
like
from the MCU, they would have the context, or they might have the forethought that this might not work out, that like she might die in this film.
Well, no, I think the idea is I don't really care what happened. No, I'm not saying this is what I thought. I'm saying that this is what people I've seen online even say, like, what's even the point of this movie when I know? So this movie takes place a few years before the movie where she dies. It's like it's supposed to bridge the gap between some movies, basically, like what she was doing. But what's the point of seeing that? This is what people are saying. Like, what's the point of seeing that when I know that she dies in this other movie? So this kind of ties into the stuff I was saying before, where people feel they're like spoiled and they feel that the films to come out have to tie in. They have to further the franchise. What's the problem with a movie that doesn't? But a lot of people had an issue with it.
I mean, Star Wars did it.
Star Wars came out with prequels, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people like the prequels more. Because the prequels gave like context to the original trilogy. But Marvel, for some reason...
There's also a lot of haters for the prequels.
Yeah, that too. But I guess it's just interesting the way people view it. I think like that's why I said like I like that that's the one you saw, because you come with an interesting perspective of not really caring.
It's
like you just saw a
it's
movie.
like watching the prequels before the original trilogy of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. But I guess in this case, it's like watching I guess in your case, it's like watching the prequel before. But like for someone else, it's like having just seen the trilogy and then watching a prequel, but you're like, I don't really care because these characters are dead, or whatever. And in her case, she's dead. Which I find interesting. But the thing that I also want to touch on is like some of these other comic book studios, like DC. I don't know if you remember the Joker movie that came out.
Yeah, I did.
That was a completely standalone movie.
That was a great movie.
And it was a great movie. And it's like, and I think it may have won an Oscar for its like editing or something, but it was an Oscar worthy performance too. So like you're seeing, because of the oversaturation of Marvel, the connected thing, these standalone movies being performed well too. So like just what I'm trying to get at is like it feels almost like this Black Widow was an attempt at that, because it is
to bring it back.
Well, no, it's just it is almost like a standalone character driven movie that doesn't really further the story in any way, the overarching story in any significant way. But people have not really liked that.
People hate on it too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
I thought it was
reviews.
fine. I liked it.
Mixed reviews.
Yeah.
For this. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's a lot like Star Wars spin-offs too. We had the spin-off. What was it? Rogue
One.
Rogue One. That was a spin-off of what happened in between the two trilogies, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that movie was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. Didn't it do great?
It did. I think also just like the critical reception, like people, the performances were really cool. Which is just interesting, I guess, how these different attempts are perceived, because like I feel like there's just spoiled people who just feel like because I've seen this interconnected thing, it must continue to be this way.
They want to continue to see it progress and not really care for
not
background
open to anything,
stories,
new or just not connected or background. Yeah.
Because when you know the ending already, you don't care for it as much.
Yeah.
But that's cool. I gotta say, after like talking through this with you, I do have a greater appreciation for Marvel.
Yeah.
A much greater appreciation for Marvel than I ever had.
I'm glad.
I've only had appreciation for like Spider-Man before. I was a diehard Spider-Man fan growing up.
Well,
as a
I'm happy.
kid.
I also got you excited for the new one that's coming out. It's coming out this December.
Which like builds that excitement because I had that that fanboy spirit of me for the original Spider-Man.
The original ones, yeah.
So that's exciting to know. I had no clue.
Yeah.
Like even me as someone who was interested in the original Spider-Man, because I'm so disconnected from the Marvel universe and what's coming out, I had no clue that they had that plan coming in December.
As just like a final thing, do you have any interest in like watching, like as someone who hasn't watched like all of them, would you ever like, do you feel like the need to watch like the ones that you missed, or do you just not care?
I like completeness. And it bugs me without having a sense of completeness to things. but I have been giving up on that, or like letting that go a little bit, with like thinking just about like reading a book, and if you don't care for the book, being able to let that book, put it down and let it go. So I think some of the same principles serve here, where some of the films that may have been like critical to the telling of the MCU franchise. Would you call that the franchise itself? You'd call like franchises like the different story arcs really that are
like,
going on.
Yeah, you could like the cinematic universe.
Yeah, the cinematic. Let's call it the cinema. I'm learning the terminology as we go. But to put part of like the critical films for the cinematic universe behind me and like accept that I haven't watched it, something that I think I could come to terms with a little bit more, with having the gaps filled with just like a higher level story interpretation of it, or story summary of it rather. So I don't see myself going back and watching all 22 films.
I don't recommend it.
I might watch a few though.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm just interested because there are a lot of people. I often think about how accessible it feels. You know, like now that there's so many out, does someone who hasn't seen them feel like there's no point, or like it's you miss the bus maybe, because like the people who have been watching, let's say every year that they come out, are different than the people who are like just catching up now. Because if you're just catching up now, you have like
a lot to catch up on,
many hours to catch up on, which is like not that easy.
Which I don't think you should overload yourself with it. Yeah. Which is what people fall victim to, I think, in this situation. So personally, I think I'm gonna try to avoid overloading myself with all 22 films. I think it would be more strategic, to understand like the summaries. Understand like what has happened in the universe. Any missing gaps, like do a little bit of research, I guess. But it's easier to consume content in bits and pieces, like you're talking about people who are watching it as you're going through. You just filled in a lot of gaps for me now in this 1 hour conversation. So that helps out. Thank you, John.
You're welcome, Josh.
Appreciate it.
Look at that.
And that's beautiful.
Another episode in the books.
Another episode in the books. Next week. Are you excited for next week?
What's next week?
I have no clue.
Yeah, dude, me either. I wish I
think it's dating again. Dating? I think we're back to dating
now. Yeah, because that's been the cycle. We've been going off and back into dating. We're talking about dating now.
Yeah. Man, I have not had a break. This is my first break. Somewhat. And
I know, you've been having tough
a lot of back-to-back films, man. I mean, a lot of back-to-back content outside of this one. But exciting dating.
I think next week we should have like a structure, but it'll be at least a little less
content, you think?
I think it would be more of a conversation.
Yeah, as to what we see our dating life is now,
because we're talking like right now.
What do we want it going forward?
Yeah, so I think it's more. Maybe we should have like some thought starters, but I think it should be a little more casual. Just
I think there's a lot to dig into.
There is though.
A lot to dig into, and a lot to look forward and like plan out. Like, what's our dating mission?
Yeah, what's our end goal? What's the end of the dating cinematic universe?
Wait and find out next week.
All right, guys. Shouldtalkmore.com is our website. Watch us, find us, follow us, subscribe to us, like our stuff, and
subscribe.
And just thank you.
If you haven't yet, you're really missing out. Your parents, your siblings, your kids, your dog has subscribed to us, and they're talking about us tonight at the dinner table. Yet you're still here unsubscribed.
What a loser.
Yeah, go and smash that subscribe button now before you forget.
Do you have anything to do right now?
Yeah. Who was I today? Oh, I was Bruce Wayne. Was that the right name?
Bruce Wayne is Batman.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. I guess you were right. But it's DC, not Marvel.
Oh, guys, did you? Yeah, I gotta go.
Okay.
I'm too ignorant for this.
All right. See you guys. I have nothing to do. Yeah. I'm just gonna sit here until we record the next episode.
Oh, am I supposed to get up and continue to block the camera like I've done in the past
Yeah.
Original episodes. I'm bringing it back.
Okay. Goodbye, guys.